Hello and welcome to another episode of Professional Book Girl. My name is Kayla and I read a ton of books so that I can recommend the best to you, and it is episode 20. How insane is that? I can't believe it. The time has flown by. I just love getting to sit down and recording and sharing my thoughts in this format with you guys. So thank you so much for being here. The new reality of this is that I'm recording this after work, which I like to record weekly. This little PBG insights for you guys. I like to record weekly because sometimes I'll just read a book and be like, I need to talk about it this week. Or, for my opening segment, what I'm obsessed with, I like it to be timely. I don't really like to bulk record episodes, but the reality of my life now is that I have a full-time job. So I just finished work for the day and now I am sitting down to record, but I've been looking forward to it all day. I'm just so happy to be here. I hope you're happy to be here too. Quickly, our one announcement: we have a book club on this podcast. I forgot the month. I almost said February, and I think I did that last month too. Oh my God. Our March book club pick is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. You guys, I haven't read it yet because I'm waiting until right before I record the episode. And I felt like, here we go. My imposter syndrome is coming in, but some episodes I finish recording and I'm like, oh, that was a good episode. I feel good about it. Other ones, not so much. That's just like the nature of life, I guess. But my February book club pick, I felt like I could have done a better job overall expressing my thoughts. And like on those episodes, they are completely full of spoilers. On last week when I accidentally said spoiler free, I'm just so used to saying spoiler free. But I'm going to make myself now read the book like right before I record. So it is so fresh. So my thoughts are fresher. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the Frozen River book club episode. But regardless, I'm so excited to read this because I keep getting messages from you guys freaking out that you love it. Today I got a message from someone saying they're obsessed with it. So I have FOMO from my own book club because I'm waiting until right before the episode airs to record it, which means I have to wait to read it. You understand the gist of what I'm saying. Anyway, that episode is coming out on March 28th. You can submit your thoughts to be included in the episode. Either type them out and DM them to me at Caraval or Professional Book Girl, or email them to professionalbookgirlpod@gmail.com, or record a voice note and I will play it in the episode. You can send that to professionalbookgirlpod@gmail.com. Send those to me by March 26th, and I'm probably going to record the episode on the 27th, and then it'll be out on the 28th, and my FOMO will be cured. Quick little aside that I think every single time I edit this podcast, if you are watching on video, not that we are playing a drinking game, or if you're drinking, whatever, good for you, I guess. Take a sip of whatever beverage you have whenever I freaking touch my hair. I touch my hair nonstop, and I got a haircut a few weeks ago, and I feel like I'm like relearning how to have it at the shorter length. And when I record, I'm literally just staring at myself. So I keep looking at my hair and touching it. And everyone listening on audio is probably so confused, but anyone watching understands that I'm constantly touching my hair. I'm sorry. And I bet you it has annoyed someone watching, and it's annoying me too. I'm trying to stop, but I want my hair down, not up. So it's just like, the struggle of my life. My life is so hard. Okay, let's talk about what I am obsessed with. This is something I am just always obsessed with, and it is having a bookish New York City day. If you don't know, I live in New York City, and I get asked a lot about New York City recommendations, which never feel like you're annoying me. I really love that. It makes me very happy when people ask me for my recommendations. I obviously have a unique perspective on the city because I live here, and there are things I always recommend. Like I would always say I'm going to go into like my bookish day, but I would say I always recommend to people definitely go to the Met. I feel like you guys know, if you follow me on Instagram, Caraval, I love the Met. And I always recommend this, and I recommend it to New Yorkers as well. Go to the 9/11 Museum. It is so sad. It is deeply emotional, but it is so moving, and it's just like, it's a must do experience, but then like have fun plans after that to lighten the mood. I went there actually like exactly 4 years ago. It was a few weeks before COVID hit, which I cannot believe 4 years. This has actually been the first year where I haven't felt visceral PTSD walking around the city. For the last 3 years, on every anniversary of when New York City shut down, anytime I was outside, I would just like feel how I felt when I was walking around, and it was like a movie when nobody was around. So glad that I guess like that wound is healing a little bit. I'm not so stressed out walking around. Maybe it's because I'm on Lexapro now, who knows? But like a few weeks before COVID happened, my aunt and uncle came in with my younger cousins, and me and my sister met up with them, and we went to the 9/11 memorial because my cousins were learning about it in school. And like, I remember 9/11. I was 7. So, I don't remember it the way that like adults did, but I remember that day, and I remember like that time period. But they were learning about it in school, and they had all these questions. So my aunt and uncle took them in, and it sounds weird to say, but we had a really lovely day at the memorial. And there's actually a photo of like, I grew up on Long Island, so my community was heavily impacted by 9/11. And there was someone in my community who was a firefighter, many people in my community who died in 9/11. But one of them, his like sister was like very high up in the PTA in the school districts, and his photo was in like my elementary school when you would walk in the morning. And in the 9/11 museum, his photo was in there, and I was like, it was the same photo. And I was like, oh my God. It's deeply upsetting, but it is very moving and important. But then afterwards we went to like a restaurant nearby and just had like a fun night, but then we're still like talking about it. I'm rambling on forever, but that is really highly, highly recommend. Like, don't just go to the reflection. It's not a reflection pool. What is it? The fountain thing. Go into the museum. It is totally worth it. But if you want to have a perfect bookish day in New York, and if you live here, you can do this too. This is what I would recommend. So I am a downtown girl. I live downtown. That stupid little saying, like, I never go above 14th Street, is pretty true for me, except I go to 17th Street because that is where the Barnes & Noble and Union Square is. So this is a downtown centered bookish day, which the whole city is beautiful. I always say I'm going to end up on the Upper East Side, but I'm a downtown girl. Still a downtown girl. I thought for a second I wanted to move uptown this year, but I don't. I'm staying downtown. So I'm not moving. Nobody worry about that. I actually just told my roommates today I'm going to sign the lease for another year, because how can when I leave this apartment, it is going to be such an ordeal because everything in here is mine, and all the books and my beautiful bookshelves. And like, I just can't leave, I love my room too much. But this is how you are going to have the perfect bookish day in New York City. So you are going to start the day in Union Square around lunchtime. So I know this area like the back of my hand because my office, my first job, I was there for 5 years, and the office was right next to the Barnes & Noble in Union Square. So I have spent so many hours of my life in Union Square. I still spend a lot of time in Union Square. It's one of my favorite areas of the city. So you're going to go to Union Square, and you can either start book shopping, or first, because this obviously is going to have food along the way, because one of the best things to do in New York is eat, you are going to go to like a fast casual type place for lunch. So there's Cava right there, which is like Chipotle, but Mediterranean. I love Cava so much. When I worked in Union Square, that Cava right there, I was always there. There's a Del Toro, there's a Chipotle, Chopped, all of those. But then there's also Ito is a really great Japanese and sushi spot. Pasta Eater is really great. Italian. Javelina is like a few blocks north of Barnes & Noble, but they have really good Mexican. So you're going to start the day with a great meal, because like, yeah, I'm a meal girly. Like, I need a meal before I can do anything. And then you are, though, going to go to Strand first on 14th Street. This is the famous one. And I recommend doing this whole day on a weekday if you can, because Strand gets so crazy on the weekend, and it's like really not enjoyable when it's crazy like that. So if you can go during the weekday, I highly recommend. I did part of this bookish day a few weeks ago with my friend Amanda, the bookish librarian, and it was a rainy like Wednesday, so it was perfect. It felt like we were the only ones in Strand, so it was so nice that you actually have room to move around, actually explore, look through all of the stacks. They just rearranged for, I think, the first time in like, I've been going there like consistently for like 10 years, and I walked in the other day and it was rearranged, and I was so confused. Interestingly, though, they moved the romance up, so I think that says a lot about the book buying habits. But you're going to go to Strand. And the reason why you're going to start there is because 99% of the time, they don't have the book you're looking for. If you are like me and read a lot of mainstream titles, but also so when you walk into Strand, if you've never been there, it's like a giant room, right? And it's all tables, and that's where all the new releases are. And then when you get into the stacks of the "Get Lost in the Stacks" quote, those are all used books. So when I go to Strand, I'll typically go kind of around a pub day, I guess, if there's something I'm looking for. They usually don't have what I'm looking for, but if they do, I grab it. But then I have a few authors. They're typically historical fiction authors that I'm trying to buy up their backlist. So Alison Ware, Susan Holloway Scott, and Stephanie Marie Thornton are three of them that I always go and look at what the used section is, and I'll like pick up a copy. If they have them, it's kind of hit or miss. So spend some time at Strand. They do have a coffee shop in there now. That's pretty new. So you can get a coffee, walk around. If you don't have a tote bag, you have to buy a tote bag because it's like iconic. Upstairs, it has a great YA section. The basement really stresses me out, but you can go in the basement if you want. After Strand, you're going to go to the Barnes & Noble in Union Square, which is the biggest Barnes & Noble in the country. I love that bookstore so much. Like I said before, I used to work literally right next door to it. I would spend so much time in that Barnes & Noble specifically because they always have what I'm looking for. That's why you're going to go there second, because if you have a list of books in your mind for this day, start at Strand. They probably won't have it, but then go to Barnes Noble and then you can pick it up. They also have a cafe upstairs, so you can get a coffee there if you didn't. There's a large seating area up there, so you can sit and enjoy your drink. The fourth floor is like all fiction. It has like everything really. They always have what I'm looking for there, so you can spend so much time in both of those stores. But I started saying this and I cut myself off. I spend so much time in that Barnes and Noble because if I like had time to kill before dinner or something after work, before I lived in the city, or even when I did live in the city, I would just go into Barnes and Noble. If I had a bad day at work, I would just pop literally right next door into Barnes and Noble. Sometimes on my lunch break, I would pop into Barnes & Noble. If I got yelled at work that day, I would go into Barnes & Noble. So I have spent so much time there, and it's probably my favorite bookstore in the city. And I know I'm supposed to say in Indies, but that Barnes & Noble is just like magic, really. It's like so big, so beautiful. I think the outside of it is so beautiful. So you're gonna spend a lot of time there. Then we're going to go for a walk. So you have to walk through Union Square Park, like to get from Strand to Barnes & Noble. So take a gander through the park, depending on what day of the week is. There might be the farmer's market. There could be a protest going on, a political rally. You never know what you're going to find in Union Square. That's part of why I love it so much. Then you're going to walk over to Fifth Avenue though, and you're going to walk up Fifth. If you want to do some shopping, you can. There's like Zara, H&M. I don't think there's a Mango there. There's an Anthropologie. If you like higher end brands, walk down Fifth, and eventually you will end up in Washington Square. So you can spend some time in Washington Square Park, check out all the NYU students. You might see a celebrity there. There's usually a bunch of skateboarders. Take some pics. It is like a very pretty park. I always feel like I'm in like Revolutionary era when I'm in there because of the lamps are like very old timey lamps, and the buildings around it look very colonial. So from Washington Square Park, you're going to enter Soho. And if you want to do like shopping, this is where you're going to do it because they have every single store, like high end, mid market, anything you want, they have in Soho. And then you are going to go to the McNally Jackson in Soho. They have a new location. They just moved onto the other side of Broadway. This store is so beautiful. I stumbled upon it when my friend was visiting, and it is just like, it's gorgeous. Like it really is just a gorgeous indie bookstore. It's not too big, so you can get it done in a decent amount of time. From there, if you want to, you can go check out Bibliotech, which is a new wine bar / coffee shop in Soho. When I was there, I honestly didn't even browse the books because it's like you're basically in like a lounge, and then there's like the walls are just covered in books and you forget that they're for sale, but you can check that out. But then it's time to eat again because by now we've been doing a lot of walking and it's probably dinner time. So you were going to go over into the East Village, and we have a few options here. So they're actually all Italian because you're in New York, like you need to have an Italian dinner. So I would recommend either Bar Primi or Gemma, which both of those are right next to the Bowery Hotel, which you might see a celebrity there. One time I was eating at Gemma and I saw Paris Hilton. That was very exciting. Of the two, I think I prefer Bar Primi, but they are both very good. Or you can go to Supper or Little Frankie's. They are owned by the same people. They have the same menu. Supper is a bit more, I think Supper is like prettier, but they are both so good. If you go to Supper, you'll be closer to our next location because you're going to end the night at Book Club Bar. And here you can browse for books. You can sit and chat and do a little book haul of everything you bought throughout the day, get a drink. They also have mocktails, coffee, everything you would want there. And by the end of that, you would be so tired. And then you would go home or go to your hotel and read one of the new books that you got. And that is my recommended perfect bookish New York day. Okay. Speaking of my recommended, although like I said in another episode, I'm a professional recommender. Honestly, I feel like I say in real life, I'll be like, I'm a micro influencer. And I'm always like, I know it's so cringy. Or I'll be like, I'm a book influencer. And I feel weird saying it because I am. I put a lot of work into this shit. And now that on Caraval, we've just been growing so much lately, which is very exciting because I do put so much work into it. I feel like after I surpassed 15K, I was like, I'm an influencer, but I identify more with a recommender because I love recommending things. And that is what an influencer does. But I just feel like the word recommender, I don't know. Anyway, all of that ramble to say, to the theme of today's episode is books that I always recommend. And there is a little bit of a caveat to this. So given what I do, like I just said, I'm a book influencer. In real life, when books come up in conversation, I'm always like, oh, here we go. Like, do I get into it? Do I let them know who they're speaking to? Do I just go with the flow of their conversation? Or I will be with someone, or I'll be with a group of people who know what I do and they're like, give me a recommendation. Or I will be with a group of people and only one person knows about Caraval and this, and they bring it up and informing the other person. And then they will inevitably always say, what book do you recommend? And I actually hate getting that question because there's so much that goes into it. So I always say, well, what genre are you looking for? That usually stumps people. Like a casual reader will stump them. So I like to have kind of go-tos on hand. So it's pretty much like I'll pull books from my favorite shelf, or I'll start, if the person is a reader, when I say, well, what genre do you like? What are you looking for? Then I start digging into it a little bit more. If they say historical fiction, I'll say, well, what time period are you interested in? Because I've just got like a catalog in this brain of titles I can start pulling out. So I always have a few more than a few, but there are books that in real life, when someone asks me for a book to read, these are three of the ones that I always recommend. We are kicking it off with a thriller, one of my favorite thrillers ever, and it is The Family Plot by Megan Collins. I'm a huge fan of all of Megan's thrillers. I have loved all of them. The way that she writes just sets her books apart from every other thriller, I would say, because her characters just feel so real. She writes about real life things in the midst of these crazy fucked up thrillers, and it's like my mind is always blown. Like her book Behind the Red Door, which has the most insane plot. I'm not even gonna go into it because I will just be on like a rabbit hole forever, but I highly recommend that book. Also, I recommend all of her books, but the plot was so unique. But in the beginning of that book, the main girl, is like talking about her anxiety, and I at the time was like really going through it with my anxiety, and I started like using the coping mechanisms that the character was using in that book. And it's just like, I thought that was just so cool. And I love that when I read her last release, The Family Plot, that's when I finally put this together, and I was like, her thrillers stand out because the characters feel like real people. And the characters in this book, oh my god. So I can picture when I was reading this book, it was, I think, summer of 2022. And that was the first summer that I really started going to my mom's pool. And some of you who are new to me, you don't know Summer Kayla yet. Summer Kayla is the best version of myself. The summer is my favorite season. I feel like I'm just the best me in the summer. I'm happier, I'm lighter, I'm reading all the time, I'm always out in the sun. It's just like I just love Summer Kayla. And what I do, it typically is I spend as much time as I can at my mom's pool, and there's a whole clique of older ladies that I get all of the drama. It's literally like White Lotus on my mom's pool. The drama that goes on here is insane. And I'm just like, my mom's obviously in the mix with the drama. It's like White Lotus meets Housewives, and my mom is a housewife, and I'm like Gia Giudice, like the daughter that is a part of it, but is really just like on the side listening it. So I'll be like reading my book and then like listening to all this drama happen. And then when me and my mom go home, we like debrief all the drama that happened that day at the pool. I love it so much. And then I go to the beach every weekend. Like I am happiest when I am on the beach. I'm literally right now, I'm like, I'm ready for summer. Christmas is over. It's time for summer. But when I read this book anyway, this was when I first started going to my mom's pool. And this is the first like real pool read I remember reading there. So I remember I went to the pool after work, and it's open until 7. So I could get like at least an hour and a half in. And I was reading this book and I was like, oh my God. And then I went home and I posted an Instagram story talking to the camera, and I was like, I am obsessed with this book. And then that is how I started talking to Megan, and we become like Instagram friends, which has just been so cool. I've gotten to interview her in the past on my old podcast, Books in the City. There on my Instagram page, Caraval, there is a recorded interview that we did for, I almost said The Family Plot, no, for Thicker Than Water, her latest novel. And she doesn't know this, but I'm hoping I will get to interview her again on this podcast when her next book comes out, which also sounds so good. So what is this book about? You might be wondering. Also, I want to say I still think about this book like I've never read anything like this before or since, which is such a testament in a genre as saturated as thrillers. So this is a thriller about a true crime obsessed family, and the narrative about true crime that takes place in this book is something that, one, I think is so important. And I think since this book has come out, it's been a few years, but there has been kind of a shift in the conversation about true crime where people are talking about, why are we so obsessed with this? You see these people, like I see frequently on TikTok, a victim's family member being like, my sister's story is being turned into a documentary or a podcast, and we didn't have anything to do with it or give permission or things like that. Like there is like an underside to true crime, like there is with anything. And this book really examines, why are we so obsessed with it, and what is the line between honoring the victims and exploiting them, all wrapped up in a perfect thriller. So obsessed right away. Our main girl is Dahlia, and if you know true crime, that might sound familiar to you. So she grew up in a true crime obsessed family where her and all of her siblings were named after famous true crime cases, and they were homeschooled in this house. It was on this island, and like basically a haunted house. I pictured them as like the Addams Family, honestly. And they were homeschooled, and they would learn all about the famous true crime cases, because their parents were just so obsessed with true crime. So she left home, she left the island that she lived on when she was 16, because after her twin brother disappeared, and she was kind of like never had the same relationship with her family since. Like I don't think she's seen her siblings since then. She just ran away and tried to distance herself from this kind of crazy life that she grew up in. But now it's 10 years later, and her dad died, so she has to go home for the funeral. And when they are going to bury him, I think he was in like a crypt or something, they discover that there's already a body in there. And that is when the whole mystery kicks off. So it's like, what is the body? Like who is that, and like what happened? Why is he in there? So she starts re-examining her past, and she's also re-meeting her family as an adult. It's also so hard to talk about this without spoiling, because I could just like gush about this one forever. But each member of her family kind of deals with this new thing happening, and also the way that they um grew up with true crime in different ways. So like her sister has become famous on Instagram for like creating these like dioramas and art pieces of violent crime scenes from these famous true crime cases, and they like start turning the house into a museum, and like people from the public come to see it. And it's just really like, it's so insane. I feel like maybe, I hope I'm doing a good job getting that across. It's hard to talk about it without giving everything away, but if you are looking for a great thriller, highly recommend. The plot twist in this is one of my top, I would say, 3 most shocking plot twists. I will never forget it. I think about it frequently. This has become a gold standard thriller for me, where I compare other thrillers to how this one made me feel. And I think that is the highest honor in any genre. It is so good. I highly recommend for anyone, if you ever had a true crime phase, which I'm not disparaging anyone who's still into true crime. Like whenever there's a great new Netflix doc, I obviously will watch it. What's the one I watched recently? It was by the people who did Don't Fuck with Cats, like American liar or something like that. I don't know. That was crazy. But I highly recommend this. I recommend all of Megan's thrillers. They are all so, so great. This one is my favorite though. It's one of my favorite thrillers ever. I always recommend this one to people. When someone says they want a thriller, this is the one that I tell them they need to read. I gave this 5 stars, of course. That is The Family Plot by Megan Collins. The next book is a fantasy, and it is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This is the first in a 3-book series. I love this series so, so much. This one came to me by way of my sister. And if you listen to the Erin sode, which I see your messages that we want Erin back. I think we can make that happen semi soon. I don't want to get her ego too high. But that is me being the older sister, keeping her humble, although no one makes me more humble than my younger sister. But my sister had these books in the house, and I can't remember. I don't think she ever even uttered the word Caraval to me. I probably saw it on Instagram, because this is what happens a lot. I will see a fantasy series on Instagram, realize I've seen it on my sister's bookshelves. I'll be like, do you think I like this? Most of the time, it's kind of 50-50 if she says yes or no. And sometimes she'll even just say no because she doesn't want me to also love a series that she loves. And that is just a stupid sister thing. But this one I picked up and I loved so much. And a part of why I loved it is because it is about 2 sisters named Scarlett and Tella. And I had the opportunity to interview Stephanie Garber once again for my last podcast, Books in the City. And I told her, I was like, me and my sister are so Scarlett and Tella. And when I was reading this, I thought that, and I didn't want to tell Erin because I thought she would be like, you're being so lame, like, stop it. But I finally said it and she was like, I know. And like, I am Scarlett and she is Tella, even to the point where like Scarlett has like a strip of gray hair. And fun fact about me, I'm just revealing all of my life secrets. I have like so much gray, and like people often think that my front pieces are highlights, like the money piece, but they're actually gray. Fun fact. So even just like down to that little detail that like Scarlett has a strip of gray hair, I was like, oh my God, like she is me. I am Scarlett. And obviously she was my favorite character. But these books, they are fantasy, but in the sense, it's a fantasy series, but I would say that these are magical and whimsical. It's very different than what you're going to get in like Sarah J. Maas or Jennifer Almond Trot, like something like that. They are YA, and they do read a bit YA. There's a spin-off series, Once Upon a Broken Heart, which I also recommend, but I would read Caraval series first. And those ones read even a bit younger, but like Caraval is definitely YA, which there's nothing wrong with, just like know that going into it. I just love these books, and I would love to get lost in this world, although the actual event of Caraval would stress me the fuck out. So what is this series about? The main girl, like I said, the main girls are Scarlett and Tella, but like Scarlett's kind of the main girl, and maybe that's just me saying that because I'm a Scarlett. And they live on this like very tiny island. Their dad is a powerful merchant. Their mom died when they were younger. They were very close with her. And Scarlett's the older sister, and her dad has arranged a marriage for her. And she is not happy with this because her whole life she has dreamed of going to Caraval. So what is Caraval? This is a once a year performance, but it's really like a carnival. Get it? Caraval carnival, where the audience like participates in it. So think of it as like a reality game show, right? Like you can either choose to watch the game play out, or you are in Caraval playing the game of Caraval. So what happens in Caraval is that it's a game of, this is from the back of the book, a game of love, heartbreak, and magic, which like check. But you basically are like, things are like illusions, and you're trying to like get out. Like the point, I guess, is to get out of Caraval. And this year though, the winner of Caraval will be the person who finds Tella, Scarlett's sister, first. So I said that out of order, I guess, but Scarlett and Tella end up going to Caraval. So Scarlett is like forced to play because she's trying to save her sister from Legend, who is the kind of like mysterious enigma creator of Caraval. And he's using Tella as bait for the winner. And now Scarlett is forced to play. She meets a sailor that helps her get there. So there's love interest. The thing with Caraval, though, and I think we might have spoken about this in the episode with my sister, the whole premise when you're playing the Caraval game is that you can't believe anything that's actually happening because it's all a part of the game and the performance. For me, I'm a very literal person. Like, I don't know if I'm a very literal person, but with something like this, like I'm more straightforward, I would say, than literal. Which I guess those are like the same thing though. I don't know. But when I say I'm not a literal person, I mean like I love to exaggerate. Like I'll say 500 million trillion when I mean like 4. And I like my grandma was the same way. Like that's where I got it from. So I don't mean that's how I mean I'm not literal. But when I was reading this, I took it very literal. So something would happen and I would like believe it. And then I would say to Erin, like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And she'd be like, you can't believe anything that happens in Caraval. And it was like making me crazy because I was like, well, then how do you even know what's happening? Like if it's all fake, but it was all part of the game, I guess. But so the first book is all about Caraval, like Scarlet playing Caraval. Tella is the prize, I guess. And it's 5 nights of this game, or if they don't get, if Scarlet doesn't get her in the end, or if someone else wins, like there's this like domino effect of consequences that can happen after. And it's the first in the series, so I really can't say more, but this goes on to become one of my all-time favorite series. It's so magical. It's so much fun. It's so different from anything I've ever read. I loved the sister dynamic. I loved Scarlet. I saw so much of myself in her as the books went on. Like there was some kind of freaky parallels between her life and mine. There's so much romance. There are so many characters. The first book is obviously the introduction, but after that, the whole world kind of just like blows open and you get introduced to all these really great characters. It's so much fun. I highly, highly recommend that. That is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. And I gave the first one 4 stars, but I would say overall it's a 5-star series. The next book is The Boys Club by Erica Katz. And as I just now was thinking, what am I going to say? I was like, oh, I'm going to say, I have never read anything else like this before or since. And I could have said that about Caraval too. So maybe that is the theme of this episode, books that I just have never read anything else like. I have no, if you like this, you should read this for any of the books on this episode, which is a cool, fun thing, but then it's also a little bit annoying because I love them all so much. Specifically, like I would love another book like The Boys Club, but who knows? Maybe we'll get it one day. So this book is the show Suits meets The Devil Wears Prada. I was obsessed with this book. I think about it all of the time. My last job that I worked at, I was at a fintech and it was very much a boys club, and nothing that happened in this book was happening there, but just the way of like being around men and like using the term the boys club all the time. I was like, "Oh my God, the book The Boys Club." Like not my life, and I don't want this book to be my life, but it is so entertaining. So, this would also quickly though be a perfect TV show. If I know Suits, look, I watched Suits years and years and years ago when I was a freshman in college when I was 18. That was 11 years ago. Before Harry and Meghan even met, I was watching Suits and I was obsessed with it, and nobody else was watching it. Like I remember tweeting about it, and like nobody, this was back when I used Twitter a lot, and like I didn't know anybody else that was watching it, and I'm happy that people have now discovered it. The giant revival felt a little random to me as someone who watched it years ago, but look, everyone loved Suits. So I think we can turn this one into a show, and I would be obsessed with it. So our main girl is Alex, and she's always kind of been the type A overachiever. She was a student athlete, like super smart student. She went to Harvard. She is now in New York, and we meet her as she is starting her dream job at this very kind of prestigious law firm in New York City. And she has a boyfriend who is just like so different from her. I can't remember what his job is. I read this one like, oh God, I probably read this one like three years ago. Caraval I read like 4 years ago. So that's also a theme of this episode. Books I read a while ago. So bear with me a little bit with some of these details, but I feel like it says so much though that I read all of these books multiple years ago and I still think about them all the time, and I have enough to say about them years later to fill a podcast episode. Anyway, her boyfriend is just like in a very different career field than her. It's not as demanding, and like she is at a top law firm. So like, and it's her, she's like, I don't know if she's considered an intern. I'm not a lawyer, obviously. So I don't know what she's like, the bottom of the totem pole though. So she is like in such a different world than he is in. And it obviously, as the book goes on, like things come to fruition in their relationship because it's like they're living such different lives. A little bit of the Devil Wears Prada comparison can be made with that. So we are with her though on her first day. There's this scene I vividly remember of her going into the elevator, and there was like one other girl, I think, and it became very clear that they were going to be competition, not band together. And this is something I've always hated this in the workplace, because when I was working at a boys club, I hated this because I felt like the women should band together and I was never competing with another woman. That's not the type of person I am. I think that comes across on the show and the things that I'm interested in. And it is a real thing, though, that I've experienced in the corporate world, that like women will compete to be the top one when there's so few of them. And I just hate that. And that happens in this book a lot. So Alex gets put on the mergers and acquisitions team, which is like the most profitable and most competitive division. They're kind of like there's a hierarchy of the different types of law within the firm, and like they're at the top. And she gets um she like, I'm gonna explain it in Suits terms. So like she's the mic to this guy who I obviously pictured as Harvey. And he is like he's married, but he's like kind of like a cocky lawyer. And there's never anything romantic or sexual between them to my memory, but he takes her under his wing. But like Alex, as she is working in this job, like she starts to change. And that's something that happens when you work in these very like high stress environments where it's like your whole life becomes this job. So she's working around the clock, she's sleeping in the office, like she is going out with clients late into the night, and like the clients are usually always men and they're super creepy. And she'll like have to go on like a weekend trip, or she'll be in a client's private jet, and it's just like it's crazy. Like she can't ever get a break. And this is where like it comes to play with her boyfriend, because she is literally always working. And, you know, as like she is going up and up in the law firm, the pressure just keeps increasing. There's a little bit of maybe something might happen with a coworker, but then something comes to light about one of the cases she has, and like the reality of what's happening at the firm kind of behind the scenes, and the way that women are treated. And that becomes a huge plot point in this. And she has to kind of decide if she will stay silent and compliant or speak out and put her career at risk just for doing the right thing. So that is all I'm going to say. This book is pretty long, and I would say kind of like the first half to my memory was like her finding her footing and like the job ramping up. And like as a reader, it was exciting to read about these crazy hours she was working, and then going out and with the clients and with her coworkers, and then sleeping over in her office. And but like in real life, I could, that is not the life for me. But then the second half is kind of when shit hits the fan, and she is realizing that she sacrificed her morals and her character and who she is, and how much she's changed because of this job. And she has to figure out like if what she's going to do. So I loved this so much. I gave this 5 stars. It, like I said before, is unlike anything else that I've ever read. It is such a fun, kind of like twisty, juicy read. Just so good. I don't know what else to say except that I loved it. And that is The Boys Club by Erica Katz. It is time for some mood reads. So our first request comes from Layla, and she is in the mood for a Kate Quinn-esque cool historical time period, strong women doing cool stuff. That is just like my favorite type of book to read. So there's so many books I can say for that. Top of mind, because I finished reading it last night, is When We Had Wings by Ariel Lawson, the author of our book club pick, The Frozen River, Christina McMorris, and Stephanie Messner. This is a historical fiction novel about the real life Angels of Bataan. These were American Army and Navy nurses who were left behind in the Philippines when Japan took over. So basically they were based there before America was in the war. And then Pearl Harbor happens, and suddenly they're basically in the enemy's backyard, and Japan just quickly overtakes the American military there, and they take over the Philippines. And they had no idea what to do with women, because in their eyes, women didn't belong in war. They were the first U.S. American I'm trying to figure out how to word this because I posted my story last night, and I'll say again what I said there because I'm just so pissed about it. But I said they were the first American women to be prisoners of war. I'm not sure if that's true. I can't remember where I read it, but they were the first American women in combat to be prisoners of war because the Japanese considered them in combat just by nature of them being there, even though they were nurses. And basically what happened, I read this book. This isn't a spoiler for the book, but in the author's note, I learned the truth about why this story isn't more widely known. So there's another historical fiction novel about the Angels of Bataan. It's called Angels of the Pacific by Elise Hopper. I read that a year and a half ago. I really loved it. And I was like, why didn't I know who they were? And like you learn I know so much World War II history now because of all the historical fiction area. And I was like, just surprised I had never heard of them. And the author's note in When We Had Wings told me it is because when the Japanese were taking over the Philippines, General MacArthur had the opportunity to evacuate all of the women that were on the island. Instead of doing that, he only took a handful of them, and the rest of the spots on like the helicopters he gave to his military personnel. And I am sure that those men were important, but this is at a time when these women were in so much more danger being captured by the Japanese because they did not know what to do with women. And they talk about in this book that they all were just so scared of the Japanese army because, like, in more recent history in World War II, it was like 5 to 10 maybe years before that, there was this horrible event, and I can't remember the name of it, but I had heard of it before, where the Japanese like took over Chinese town or something, and they killed all of the men regardless of age, even if they were children, and they brutally raped all of the women that were there. So the nurses were terrified that because this is the reputation that the Japanese army has, and they were like, that's going to happen to us. And MacArthur could have gotten all of them out to safety, but he chose not to. And then it gets worse though. The reason why these women were kind of lost to history is because when they got back, the US government made them sign basically an NDA stating that they would never talk publicly about what they went through, what they saw, and what they endured in during the war. And I won't spoil like what happens in this book, so I won't tell you about all the amazing things that they did, but these women did so many amazing things during the war while being prisoner. And they did that. They made them sign that because they did not understand why MacArthur didn't evacuate them, and they covered it up because they were embarrassed of that mistake that he made. So fuck that. And I'm so happy now that we have historical fiction about them. This When We Had Wings and Angels of the Pacific are both so great. They both cover different types of characters. You get like just different perspectives on it. I highly recommend both of them. Happy Women's History Month. The next comes from Jessica, and she's in the mood for a romance. And for this, I would say The Dating Plan by Sarah Dessy. I read this one a few years ago as well. I think about it all the time. It's a opposites attract, kind of enemies to lovers. Just I remember staying up so late finishing this, and the main guy is Irish, and I love that so much. And maybe I'm just feeling so in touch with my Irish roots because it's St. Patrick's Day in a few days, and I'm going home this weekend to eat Irish soda bread and corned beef and cabbage. So this one was more top of mind. The final request comes from Katie, and she is in the mood for something similar to Beatrice Williams. And for this, I would say anything by Natasha Lester. Natasha Lester is one of my favorite historical fiction authors. She recently has solidified herself as one of my top with her latest book, The Disappearance of Astrid Ricard, which I will be talking about on a future episode because it's my favorite book of the year so far. I loved it so much. I cannot wait to talk about it on an episode because I just got to gush and freak out about all the little things I was obsessed with in it. But what I love about her books is that they kind of all connect in the way that Beatrice Williams does. Not to the extent where with Beatrice, there's a clear order that you should read her books in. If you scroll down on my Instagram feed on K Read What, I created a guide to Beatrice Williams historical fiction. I could do that for Natasha Lester. It's not as straightforward though. It's just that like characters make cameos in the different books, and in this one, Astrid Ricard, The Disappearance of Astrid Ricard, there were 2 cameos that I caught. There might have been more because I've read her books over the years, so you forget. But one of them though, so the book that she released before this was The Three Lives of Alex St. Pierre, and Alex St. Pierre plays a huge role in Astrid. So I would just make sure you maybe read Alex before Astrid, because some things would be spoiled then for Alex's book. But Natasha Lester, just obsessed. That is our show. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure you are following, subscribe to Everything Gets to You on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. This week's episode is going to be our monthly listener's choice episode. So if you are listening to this right now and you have a book title in mind that you want to hear me talk about, send me a DM at Kayla at Professional Book Girl, email it at professionalbookgirlpod, and I will, if I've read it, I will review it. That should be my catchphrase on this show. I forgot what I already said. Please make sure you're following me on Instagram at Caraval, follow the show at Professional Book Girl. Make sure you're following, subscribe to episodes you on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. Leave a rating and review if you feel like doing it. It would make my day. Read the book club pick, listen for the lie by Amy Tintera by March 28th is when the episode comes out. Submit your thoughts to me by March 26th. That is it. Happy reading.